All right, welcome back to my YouTube channel, everyone. Today we're diving headfirst into one of the most, frankly, unbelievable spy stories in modern history. It's a tale of obsession, some pretty spectacular failures, and a man who, it seems, just wouldn't die.
Take a look at this number, 638. That's how many times the CIA, we're talking America's most powerful intelligence agency, reportedly tried to kill one single man. And get this, after decades of trying, they just couldn't do it.
So, that leads us to the central question for this whole explainer. How on earth did he pull that off? How did one man, the leader of a pretty small island nation, manage to outsmart a global superpower for more than 40 years? Well, let's find out.
Okay, so to really get our heads around the why behind all of this, we've got to rewind. We're going back to the absolute height of the Cold War, a time when, the world was split right down the middle and paranoia was just off the charts.
So it all kicks off in 1959. Fidel Castro's revolution takes over Cuba, kicking out a dictator that the U.S. actually supported. Now, in the middle of the Cold War, this was a huge deal. Castro quickly cozies up to America's biggest rival, the Soviet Union. And if you just look at a map, you can see the problem immediately. Cuba is just a stone's throw from Florida. For the United States, having a Soviet ally right on its doorstep, that wasn't just a threat, it was an absolute nightmare. And that fear is exactly what led President Kennedy to authorize a top-secret war against Castro on November 30th, 1961.
And this secret war had an official name, Operation Mongoose. And just to show you how seriously they were taking this, the guy put in charge of the whole thing was none other than the president's own brother, Robert F. Kennedy. The mission was crystal clear: get rid of Fidel Castro no matter what it took.
All right, so in the beginning, the CIA's plans were, let's say, old school. We're talking guns, snipers, ambushes, and some very, very unlikely partners in crime.
You're not going to believe this. The CIA decided to outsource the job. And who did they hire? People who had their own beef with Castro, the American mafia. See, Castro had shut down all their incredibly profitable casinos in Cuba, and they were, not happy about it. So the CIA brings in this ex-FBI agent to act as a go-between, a cutout, to keep the government's hands clean. He offers a cool $150,000 to top mob bosses to arrange the hit. The thinking was, if anything went south, the U.S. government could just say, hey, wasn't us.
And the mafia? Well, they got right to work. In one attempt, they had a sniper all set up to take Castro out at a stadium. But right as he's about to take the shot, bam! Castro is just swarmed by his bodyguards and the crowd. Shot gone. Then there was another plot, a shooter in a public rally. But he quickly realizes that the civilians standing all around him, they were actually Castro's undercover security. He had to bail, fast. The message here was loud and clear. Castro's security was no joke.
So, since the conventional stuff clearly wasn't cutting it, the CIA turned to its own version of Q Branch from the James Bond movies. The mission got handed over to a guy they called the Mad Scientist, a man named Sidney Gottlieb. His job? To get weird, to get creative. Okay, so the CIA spent over a year just studying Castro's habits, and they found something really simple. The man loved chocolate milkshakes from one specific hotel cafe. So the plan was born. They recruited a waiter there who wasn't a fan of Castro and gave him a tiny lethal poison capsule to just drop into the drink.
And this is where you just have to shake your head. This perfectly illustrates the mix of bad luck and just plain incompetence that doomed so many of these plots. The waiter hid the capsule in a freezer, but when the big moment came and Castro ordered a shake, the pill was frozen solid to the inside of the freezer. In a total panic, the waiter yanks on it, the capsule rips open, and the poison goes everywhere, except, you guessed it, into the milkshake. Mission failed.
All right, plan B. The team knew Castro was a huge scuba diving fan, so Gottlieb's lab cooked up something truly sinister. They got a diving suit and laced the inside with a flesh-eating fungus. And just for good measure, they filled the oxygen tank with tuberculosis bacteria. Horrifying stuff.
So how did this genius, evil plan fall apart? Oh, you're gonna love this. In one of the greatest ironies of all time, it was foiled by a well-meaning gift. They gave the suit to an American lawyer who was on friendly terms with Castro, and his job was to deliver it. But this lawyer, James Donovan, who had absolutely no idea it was a death trap, he takes one look at the suit and thinks, wow, this looks kind of cheap for a head of state. So what does he do? He throws the poisoned suit away and buys Castro a much nicer, brand new, and completely clean diving suit with his own money. You just can't make this stuff up.
Okay, so after the poison plots totally fizzled out, the CIA decided to switch gears again. This time they focused on something a little more direct and a lot more explosive.
Once again, the agency zeroed in on Castro's personal habits. He was world famous for his Cuban cigars, right? Smoked like 20 of them a day. So the idea was actually pretty simple but deadly. Replace one of his cigars with a perfect replica that was packed with enough explosives to, well, blow his head clean off.
But here's where we start to see the real reason for Castro's survival starting to emerge. The CIA gave this box of exploding cigars to one of their agents for delivery. The only problem? That agent was secretly a double agent, working for Cuban intelligence the whole time. So instead of ending up on Castro's desk, that box went straight to his security team. Ouch.
And the explosive ideas just kept on coming, in all shapes and sizes. On one hand, you had the handshake bomb, a ring that would detonate when you shook hands. The big problem there? It was basically a suicide mission for the agent wearing it, so that plan got scrapped pretty quick. Then on the complete other end of the spectrum, they planted 500 pounds, you heard me, 500 pounds of C4 under a road Castro used all the time, enough to vaporize his whole motorcade. And that plan failed because it rained and the water corroded the wiring. Unbelievable.
After so many failed attempts to, physically get rid of him, the CIA pivoted to psychological warfare. The new thinking was pretty simple. If you can't kill the man, maybe you can kill his image.
And this was a really big shift in their strategy. The goal was no longer assassination. It was character assassination. The idea was to humiliate him, to make Castro look weak or ridiculous, hoping that the Cuban people themselves would then turn against him.
And this is where the plots just go completely off the rails into the bizarre. They had a plan to dust his boots with something called thallium powder, a chemical that would make all his hair fall out, including his iconic beard. That whole thing was foiled simply because Castro canceled the trip where they planned to do it. Then, get this, another plan was to pump aerosolized LSD into a radio studio while he was giving one of his marathon speeches, hoping he'd have a total meltdown, live on the air. Senior officials ended up killing that one, probably because they realized it was just way too risky and unpredictable.
So after all these wild, expensive, and frankly embarrassing failures, we have to circle back to our original question. How did one man survive all of this?
I mean, was it all just incredible luck? Was Fidel Castro simply the luckiest person in history? Did he really dodge 638 assassination attempts through a long series of funny coincidences and happy accidents?
The answer, it turns out, is a definite no. I mean, sure, luck played a part now and then, but the real secret to his survival was an absolute masterclass in counterintelligence. Castro wasn't just getting lucky, he was playing chess. First, he built this incredibly effective and fiercely loyal intelligence network that was always one step ahead. Second, like we saw with the exploding cigar, he had successfully placed his own double agents deep inside the CIA's anti-Cuba operations. And most importantly, he wasn't playing this game alone. He had the full support and expertise of the Soviet Union's own spy agency, the KGB. This turned the whole thing into a high-stakes showdown between the world's top intelligence agencies.
So in the end, this long, strange story of exploding cigars and poison milkshakes, it tells us less about Fidel Castro and a whole lot more about the kind of paranoia that gripped a superpower during the Cold War. It really shows the extreme, almost absurd lengths the US was willing to go to neutralize what they saw as a threat. I mean, the question it leaves us with is, what does it really say about a country when its top spies are seriously considering a plan to make a world leader's beard fall out? If you found this dive into one of history's wildest stories worthwhile, be sure to subscribe for more explainers just like this one.